Okay, let's get started, everybody. Did you all get your sugar high from the brownies? We're all, and the coffee, there's more coffee. We're in the home stretch of the day. I'm really excited now because we have a digital marketing panel in healthcare. And typically what we do with our summits is, you notice we have a lot of the case studies. We like to tell stories. We like presenters who tell stories. But there were so many great possible speakers and so many cool topics within digital that we decided that a panel was the best way to go. I am going to pass it over to Arun, who I mentioned before. He works at Baxter. He was on our board and just did an amazing job in helping us shape the content and to help promote the event to his audience. He has over 8 years developing and launching medical device products, and he's been involved in upstream and downstream commercial marketing roles for the US and global markets. And currently he's in the M&A team over at Baxter. And I'm going to pass it over to his very able hands, and then he can introduce the panel. Thank you. Round of applause. Thanks.
Anybody hear me? Okay, yeah, this is good. Thanks, everybody. It's good to be up here. I think this has been in the works for a little while, and Hope has certainly done a fantastic job in championing us to this point. A panel certainly is an excellent way to go, to have a diverse, set of experiences and even professional endeavors to bring to the table in addressing this topic. So before we go any further, just a little bit about setup and process here. We'll start off the panel. We'll let all the panelists, the fine panelists, introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we will go into some general questions. And each of them have a specific background that I'd like to get into and ask them some targeted questions over there. And then when we have 15 minutes left, I'm going to open it up to all of you. Take your best shot at them. So feel free. Right? They're ready. They're excited. But that'll be about 15 minutes worth of questions towards the end, and that will take up our full hour. So let's see how we do. So let's start at the end over there with Laurie. Go ahead.
Sure, you let your Baxter person start. So I'm Laurie Paulton. I'm a senior business analyst in IT, commercial effectiveness IT for Baxter. And my current role, I manage globally all of our digital tools and capabilities, integrating those with our marketers locally. And my background is I'm a voice performance major from a small school in Boston. And I started out in sales and marketing and inside sales and customer service, everything you want to do, IT, finance, for a small manufacturing firm. And then I went on to work for a little company in Sweden called Tetra Pak, and I did global marketing for them for about 5 years. And then I came to Baxter about 11 years ago, and I actually was executive assistant for renal and for the US Hospital Products Group for about 7 or 8 years. And 3 years ago, I moved over into IT, and we'll get to more why I did that.
Thank you.
To confuse me, I'm Laurie Goddard. So you'll probably need to call out which one you're asking the question to. I work at FCB Chicago. It's a integrated marketing agency city. It's actually a full service consumer marketing. We have a healthcare vertical within that, and that's where I'm working now. I've been working there for about the last 8 years. My background is actually I started off in direct marketing back in the old days, doing point of sale and CRM. It was like a heavy part of my upbringing. Actually started on the production side of things before I moved into agency, database marketing. And then I've worked across a variety of, interestingly enough, regulated industries, from US government to healthcare to financial services, and then found my passion in healthcare marketing. I think it was the first time when I realized that what I was doing actually mattered to people's lives. I wasn't trying to sell them things they didn't need. These are things that change people's lives. So, and that's what we pride ourselves on. Like I said, I've been doing it for about 8 years across different disease categories, from psoriasis to CNS to infectious diseases. And like I said, we do it all. We do everything. We're brand campaign developers, broadcast, video, social media, which I know is a hot topic today, digital marketing, CRM, and even patient education. Got it.
I'm Melanie Jackals. I'm a vice president at Edelman. We're a communications marketing agency. I oversee our digital healthcare practice here in Chicago. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Edelman. We have a wide array of solutions and do pretty much everything. My background, I've always worked agency side. I started working in beauty and then kind of worked my way to consumer wellness and now really to focus in the healthcare industry. So I have experience on all sides of this, wellness and pharma, but have really found my passion in pharma and working with associations. I totally agree with you that it makes you feel like you're doing something that actually has an impact, and that's so meaningful and makes coming to work, important every day. So that's my background and why I'm here. Glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Sarah Van Hursley with Blue Chip. SVP of Innovation is my title, but I also have the last 6.5 years I've been leading our digital marketing team at Blue Chip. Our healthcare business, we actually have two sides of the business. So one side is more focused on CPG, where we represent clients like Ricola, Braun thermometers, Honeywell air purifiers. I'm trying to focus just on the healthcare clients. We have a lot of food. And then the other side of our business, focused more on healthcare, is actually called Continuum Clinical. And it's a little different than everything that's been talked about today, but it's patient recruitment for clinical trials. I don't know if that was heard. So it's very challenging and it's different, and we're trying to find very niche patients with niche disease states and alert them of trials that they could be a part of. So this is before drugs are FDA approved and brought to market.
Hi, I'm Tracy Edlin. I'm from Takeda Pharmaceuticals, and I head up our social, mobile, and innovation initiatives for our general medicine business unit. I've been at Takeda about 2.5 years. Prior to that, actually, I was on the digital consulting side, ironically enough, across the hall at Razorfish for a number of years. Prior to that, at a competitor called Agency.com, if anyone remembers them, but in strategy. So I made the leap, if you will, into healthcare exactly 2.5 years ago. And as I was going through my conversations with Takeda, I was trying to be as transparent as possible through every conversation. I'm like, I have no pharma background. I mean, I could not be any more clear. I'm like, I just want everyone to be clear about that, right? Because the perception had always been to work in pharma, you needed pharma background. And Takeda, to their credit, said, we can teach you pharma, we need digital. And so that's kind of where my journey started 2.5 years ago.
All right, well, thank you so much. As you can see, quite the wide expertise and array of experiences. So we're going to get into a few topics. We'll start general, then we'll start to focus down. For those of you behind me, I'm sorry that you see the back of my head over there. My wife tells me that's the better part of me, and it's the back, not so much like my face. Don't go there, that's fine. So the first thing is, just to start at a high level about digital marketing, what is its place in healthcare marketing? What have you found this to be, the place of digital marketing in healthcare marketing?
I always find, digital's in my title, it's in my group's title, it's part of our organization. I always kind of struggled with it a bit because to me, I feel like digital is the enabler. It's like saying paper or air or pencils, right? I mean, it's really enables all the work that we do. And I guess it's kind of my hope that, 5 years from now, my position is obsolete, right? It's just so embedded and so ingrained in our DNA, and it's just how we do business that we don't have separate teams of people who focus on digital, that really marketing already is digital. And I think we just need to catch up to that a little bit.
I was recently reading an article on digital transformation, and exactly to what you said, the gentleman in the article said, well, digital's not new. Radio, when it was invented, started digital. And when they started advertising on radio, that was digital marketing. So it's interesting that we're really just trying to engage with our customers where they are and when they are, right? And that's 24/7, of course, and mobile first. That's sort of like what we tee off of too.
So I suppose you talk about stakeholders. There are multiple stakeholders: the patient, physician, hospital, insurance payers. So which stakeholder has been the most receptive to digital marketing strategies and tactics, and which ones are lagging behind We can comment there, and we'll go into the whys after that.
I would just add that I'd say there probably isn't a target audience we haven't been able to reach with digital marketing. For us, though, it's really about aperture or context. So as long as you are delivering the right message to them when they're in the right mindset, so meaning they're looking at the right kind of content, then digital marketing can work. So you just have to really be thinking about where your message can be placed and what type of content it could be next to, or the content you create that can be placed there, and it can be effective.
Now, Tracy, you brought up social media, so maybe we could spend some time over there. Social media, there is marketing dollars that are put towards social media. It's like this black hole, it goes in there, and then we don't know what to do with it, how to use it properly. So at Takeda, what has been your experience, maybe your strategy using social media effectively?
That should be my biggest problem, that I have a bunch of money for social that I don't know what to do with. That would be great problem to have. I think our approach at Takeda is probably not unlike other pharmas who've been tackling the same problem. I think for us, we really started looking at it in terms of the patient and putting the patient first. So really the first stop for us was social media listening and really beginning to understand what are those therapeutic areas, what are those conversations, what's the volume of the conversation, the sentiment of those conversations. Is it a particularly vociferous group or is it a fairly quiet group? And in general, what we found is, as expected, those particular therapeutic areas that were more acute, there's probably less volume, less conversations, less insights versus those conditions that were chronic, where you had a lot more conversation around a number of different topics. So social media listening was not, believe it or not, an easy thing to get started at Takeda, but we went through a process. It took a lot of education, a lot of partnering with our medical, regulatory, legal, PV, QA, legal, privacy. I mean, the joke was literally I talked to every department with the exception of catering and the child care unit to make it happen. But once we did, it really opened the door to so many other avenues for us when it came to social, because once we were able to look at those insights, understand how they applied to our particular target audiences, and then we began to be able to look at programs that laddered up to our strategic imperatives. So even though it was somewhat tedious to start with, the social media listening was really the linchpin that enabled us to be where we are today.
And I can comment that slightly too, because we really need to be going after that data-driven engagement, right? So understanding that social listening, it's all behavioral data and what they're doing and how they're talking about our products and our therapies. And if we don't do that research first, we're just sort of like spotting things here and there and do the called blast kind of campaigns and things. But really understanding that data first and what you're missing, what data you have and what are you missing, and then doing that listening on the different social channels, key to moving forward.
Melanie, from your perspective, coming in and from the agency side, going to a client, social media becomes a topic. How do you address that? How do you put them at ease in controlling the message, in utilizing social media and the channels, there are lots of different channels there within social media. So how do you address that topic with them and then counsel them to go down a particular road?
So it's music to my ears that you're saying social listening. So obviously the research is the most important piece. And I think once you have that, you can prove the need. So that's one piece of it. But there's a lot of concern over control and who's going to engage with your content. You can't control what happens once you post something out there and then it could spiral. And I think it's just understanding that you are not responsible for what happens. You're responsible for your own content that's going to get approved. We're going to ease any concerns you have with what you're pushing out there, and understanding that no matter what, people are going to say what they say. So even if you don't have a social channel for your own company or your own brand, people could still talk about it, and that's out of your control. So if you can own it, it actually gives you more control over that content, over that conversation.
Any of you guys have more to add to that from the agency side?
I could speak to it from Ricola's perspective. So they're obviously an OTC product. You can buy it anywhere. They have like 99% ACV. Everybody knows what it is. So social for them is a little bit more passive in a way, but there's so many people talking about them. So again, playing back to social listening, been so fascinating by doing social listening with them is that Ricola's been able to find all the different ways that people use the product. Now, technically it's off label, so they can't talk about it and they can't necessarily even like that post. They can redirect and tell them the right way to use the product, but it's opened up their eyes to potential innovation. So people who are quitting smoking use Ricola because it satisfies kind of that oral fixation that you need that you've had from smoking, but it also kind of combats like dry mouth and things like that. So it's just, it keeps their mind open for future opportunities with innovation and different ways that they could go to market in the future.
With that in mind, there are different channels of social media to use. What has been maybe the most valuable channels that have been used, and what have not? What's more hype than actual productive usage? As far as channel usage.
I'll jump in here. I don't think there's one right channel. I think it's, again, the research will inform where your audience is and how they want to be spoken to. And, if you're reaching a younger audience, maybe they need quick content. Reaching an older audience, maybe they need all of the information. But I think the key there is doing the research to understand who you're talking to and where they are so that you can then pick the channel that works best for you. Obviously, there are consumer-facing channels and then more professional channels, so that kind of feeds into it. But again, once you have the research and you really understand who you're talking to, it should all flow from there.
Just to maybe talk a little bit more about that, you talk about professional channels. So we've talked a lot about engaging the patient, whereas a lot of healthcare doesn't always engage the patient, but rather the physician, nurses, pharmacists. So how or can we engage those HCPs through social media? And if so, what have you found to be effective ways to do so? And I know it's about the journey and about the research and where they are, but where are they?
They're in different places, but where we've had the most success reaching a professional audience is where we can target them and segment them. So with LinkedIn, for instance, if we're reaching neurologists, we can tell you exactly how many neurologists are on there, what professional organizations they follow or belong to on LinkedIn. So it's definitely still a work in progress in understanding where they are. And I think for physicians to be having these professional conversations, it's still new to them. But where we're able to segment that down and get the research from the platform, that's where we're going to have the most success.
There are platforms out there, Doximity, Sermo, and whatnot, where, sort of the Facebook and LinkedIn, if you will, for healthcare professionals. So there are, marketing opportunities that are available on those. I think depending on what you're judging as success or what your measures of success or ROI are, some may be more valuable than others. I think that's something to consider, but totally agree in that, you're less likely to see HCP conversations around a particular therapy or a particular disease state. That's just kind of not how we see that conversation happening yet. Maybe that will change over time, or maybe as younger doctors come into the mix and, maybe that dynamic will change. I think we do see more anonymous activity. So because no one HCP wants to be out there touting a particular therapy or drug, and then, if there's a possible ramification that we've also done a fair amount of looking at social influencers, especially on Twitter, and being able to understand, who are those key opinion leaders, and then what you do with that information then is up to the organization. But there are ways to find them. I think we just have a little ways to go before we kind of crack that code on how to engage with them.
To add to that too is use your medical team. They are healthcare professionals, most of them, either in our industry, pharmacists, nurses, nephrologists. Use them, because some of those forums that she was talking about, we as just general public can't even get access to. But if they're engaging with them, see how you can use your own medical team to do that marketing with you and do the listening with you.
So in talking about social media channels, going down it, doing the research, there has to be an infrastructure that supports all of this, right? There has to be something that enables marketers to then champion a a digital marketing campaign and keep going down. So Laurie, start with you because you're a marketer, but you're sitting in IT. Why?
Yeah, everybody sort of asked me that question. So my main focus for probably 20 years of my career was really with sales and marketing. So understanding the customer, selling, actually going out and selling, and then doing marketing and training. And when I began to think about my next step in my career and started thinking about all my technical background also and understanding a lot about IT and having an affinity or a closeness to IT systems, I just love figuring out IT systems. So I decided to take a leap and go into IT. And I started my work there with web, actually for our US market that are here. I worked closely with them about 2 years and engaged myself with good contractors and agencies that taught me everything I knew about IT and developing web. And once I learned that, I was able to understand our whole ecosystem of closed loop marketing. And so whether we're in a sort of like an understanding or a nurturing part of the campaign or all the way through advocacy, we now have systems and an ecosystem in order to get there. And my main focus right now is really the commercial side, the commercial experience. So with our mobile content management, our email automation, our web, our event platforms and things like that. So for all those multi-channels. Now, with social in particularly, we have not engaged too much with that yet, but we have a lot of opportunity. We're working closely with LinkedIn and being able to do some analysis of the environment for them and allowing our marketers to actually use that platform for what Walgreens, I think, was mentioning was the InMail. I think it was Walgreens, one of the presentations earlier. Using I think it was the lady right here was using the InMail function, very powerful tool. You understand your segment. You grab the area of contacts. Maybe it's just in one country. I support global. So if I want to email all the nephrologists in France because we're launching a product there, I literally can do that and have my nephrologist send that communication out. Or maybe I partner with a KOL in France to send it out on my behalf and about our product launch or about a new clinical study. So I engage with marketers. They're my lifeline. I'm literally a marketer sitting in IT, and I think it's a new way. If there's any other IT professional here, it's a new way of thinking of what IT should be. There should be extremely strong partnership there. I need to know the business. I need to know what the marketers are struggling with their product launches globally and locally every day in order to enable them to be successful. And that's what I sort of do is I understand the technologies. All they need to do is bring me content and bring me their journey maps and their content strategies, and I enable that.
So, Laurie, the other Laurie, got them. How have you found your clients within healthcare address that issue of building an ecosystem to support a lot of these campaigns that they'd like to run?
I've been pretty lucky because I've had some clients and my current clients right now who are innovative thinkers. They really want to push the boundaries and they're in highly competitive spaces. So they know in order to differentiate, get ahead of the people who are spending a lot more money than they are, that they have to figure out how to. So as the marketers, they're willing to go above and beyond and they want to take on the craziest ideas that we can bring them, and we do. But they also recognize that we have to get everyone else in the organization aligned to what it is that we're looking to accomplish. So it's really, really important at the very beginning, we have to engage our IT group so they understand what we're trying to accomplish and make sure that the structuring is there to handle that digitally. We also have to have our regulatory team, our review committee, aware of the channels that we're looking for, how the space works, what we're trying to accomplish, what our purpose for being there is, and why it's okay for us to be there. Get them on board early, that they understand the rules of the road that we're putting in place to address all the things that they're about that probably will never happen, but have an SOP to make sure that if something does happen, you have a response for it. And that I think that was one of the biggest wins for us, is helping them understand that, like anything else they do within their organization, we have an SOP that will address anything that comes along the road. You learn along the way. There's no particular answer necessarily.
I do think, and I firmly believe, it takes a village to raise a healthcare marketing program. And it does, right? I mean, you can't do it on your own. So, when I think about all the work that we've done over the last several years, it's really being inclusive of your promo review team, of legal, of privacy, and having all those people at the table from the beginning, as opposed to when the program's already been developed and then say, okay, why aren't you letting me go to market with it? And in my mind, the table cannot be big enough. Everyone wants a seat at the table. Let's make it as big as possible. Because in many cases, I'm actually introducing people to each other, even though they may have been at Takeda for decades, but their departments have never worked together before. And so I think that can only help us as we continue down a path of innovation.
So what I'm hearing about, and this is, I think, very fitting, something that we've seen even at Baxter going on right now, it's educating everybody about digital marketing, about healthcare marketing, and how things are evolving. And there's money and time being spent in educating everybody, not just marketers, but all of the stakeholders within the. So from the agency side, when you engage a client, do you budget out time then? Do you factor that into the time of the project to be able to address it, educate, train, and then start to move things through? Maybe we'll start with Sarah.
That's an interesting question. I don't think we have budgeted for that. Maybe we should. But I guess it's part of our job. It's our due diligence to make sure they're up to speed. So one thing that we do at Blue Chip is we actually host digital days. So we have to educate internally as well, because we're an integrated marketing agency. Not everybody touches digital or lives in that world. So having everybody understand what is possible and what they can do and what's out there has been huge for us. So we host these days. They're very easy. Listen, every company that's selling something digital will come out and talk to you for free. So we bring in about 30 on an afternoon, and we speed date our whole company with them. So they learn firsthand everything that our team is learning. And then we also invite our clients to come be a part of that as well. And it's helped because now they can speak our language, and they're already proactively thinking about ideas and bringing them.
Yeah, so I think in terms of training, we'll often budget for that. If we know that the need is there, we want to make sure that the clients that we're working with understand kind of the process and that we understand theirs. And kind of to your point of co-convening everyone, that's a big part of programming. Of course, there are things that come up where it might be unexpected, or part of the learning process when you work with a client is understanding their internal politics and their internal teams and who all of the players are. So sometimes those are things that you can't really account for. But either way, however you get to the end game, I think you're only going to have success with a client if you understand what's going on in their company. You really need to be steeped in it and be a part of it and know who's who and who's the decision maker for what, and who you're really what you're trying to accomplish and for who at the end of the day.
And I'd say from the non-agency side, from the customer side, is make sure you are partnering. Like, I know part of my job is training the agencies, so helping them understand our ecosystem, what our tools are, how we go through them, how we govern them, what our best practices are, what our privacy policies are, disclaimers, all those types of things. So I do that side. I train the agencies. So I always say, marketers just bring me to the table, and then I offer that information to them. But it helps speed the process of their creative and their development.
One of the things when people ask me if I like my job, and I say, yes, I love my job, and they say, why? And I say, I get paid to feel stupid every day, right? I mean, every day I am learning something new. And even though I'm considered, the channel expert amongst the team and amongst the department and business unit, I get to learn something new every day. And if anything, we do have formalized educational programs and digital days, and all that is awesome. But when I work with the folks in our business unit, I really encourage them to say, you know what, speak up. If there's something you don't understand, or we're talking too fast, or we're using acronyms, let's talk about it. There is no shame in not knowing everything because nobody does, especially when it comes to digital. And so, if anything, I share that with them, like, hey, I don't always have the answers, but that's okay. I'm going to go find out.
This is really helpful. Maybe we'll start to pivot now and get more to specific questions and background. And Sarah, since you have the mic, we'll start with you. You talked about clinical trials. You talked about recruiting patients for clinical trials. So could you help us understand how you use digital marketing strategies to achieve that goal?
Yeah, so it's been hard the past few years. Obviously, digital is still new to the clinical trial space. And so we're trying to introduce it and explain to them how it's going to help drive conversions. We're going to get them to a website where they can pre-screen. I mean, if you rewind to 5 years ago, all a potential patient could do was call a phone number and screen. So we've introduced the fact that we have landing pages with more information about a trial where they can actually take a pre-screener and see if they qualify. So that exists today, which is great, but leveraging all kinds of digital media to find the right patients. We work on trials that are incredibly niche disease states, which you would have never been able to find online before, to very broad, more like diabetes-based trials. So they're a lot easier to find those patients online in those communities that exist. But now that we have communities for even the most niche communities, like the one that you spoke about this morning, it's opened a whole new world to us. So we can get a message in front of those potential patients or caregivers and educate them that there might be another option for them. There might be something out there that could help you, and then bring them over to our site to learn more. So there's lots of low funnel conversion opportunities with like Facebook. For us, it's purely an advertising perspective. It's not about building a page for the trials, but getting people to click and learn more, watch a video, drive those clicks. Twitter's been really successful there for us. Native advertising like Yahoo Gemini, we've seen really great results recently. And we try a lot of different things that we've done in the CPG world. So where we might have a media partner that you would have never thought about for healthcare, we're like, what if you could change these two things about the way you target? Could you make that work for us? And they're like, yeah, we could probably do that. And then all of a sudden they have a whole new world of opportunity as well. So we're testing and learning constantly with different types of media strategies. But from a general awareness, like broad-based scale, I wouldn't say digital is the answer for trials, but we are able to hone in on a target in a very specific place.
Can you extract information from, so you can recruit a patient, they have questions, they come to your website. Depending on what they're looking for and the questions they ask, can you extract that information and then inform the commercial teams that it can drive their marketing strategies? Is that one way to use any of that data, or has?
So I'm not sure those two teams talk. Yes, so I haven't seen that happen, but.
And it's really frustrating from the back end perspective for marketing. Once it's been approved, you're like, but you had all these patients in your trial. Why don't we know anything? Patient testimonial stories are huge for so many brands, but it's so hard to find them so frequently. And your clinical trial is like the best part.
Yeah, we've dabbled in the ideas of creating a registry post. So if you have people that don't randomize in or they don't qualify for whatever reason, they still were interested in that disease state. So be able to collect them and hold them and keep them warm for once the drug is approved would be great.
That information is collected. It's just that the two groups don't talk commercial R&D. Okay. That's interesting.
I think they're trying to talk more, especially with medical in the middle. But there's been so much strong in the past, a line between what they can and can't say. Not to say we can't push that element, envelope with our medical and clinical and regulatory people, but there's usually been a line in between. But I think they're starting to try to figure that out, because clinical trials now, if a doctor is registered in a clinical trial as being one of the key doctors, we have databases now that can really tell us where our key opinion leaders are, what are they publishing, what clinical trials they're in, where they're speaking. So we can engage it on the HCP side. It's just hard to engage it on the patient side. And I guess it depends on the therapy too. Sometimes you would never use that patient data. It's just about the drug, right? So it just but maybe in a home therapy situation that they're in a trial for home therapy, it might be an opportunity for a patient side.
Absolutely. Talking about sensitive topics or disease states. Now, Laurie, I know that you have extensive experience with your firm in dealing with some of those kind of disease states. How do you build a community, a patient community online, and engage them effectively when, to start with, they're not I would say, willing openly to associate themselves with that particular disease state. So it's a little bit of a challenge there than marketing to them and getting them to engage.
It is. I think with any disease state, you have three types of patients, right? Those that just don't want to associate at all, they have it, but they don't want to talk about it. They don't want anybody to know about it. They don't engage. They don't educate. But they're absorbing as much information as they can. But then you have, just like any of us, you have those people who love to talk. They want to share because they want to give back. They have found a turning point in their life where, because of the disease, they've taken a new path in life. Their category that we work in, that is pretty common. It's very a lot of stigma. People, once they get diagnosed, go through this spiral. And some people come out on top, and they are huge advocates, and they want everyone to learn experience. So they're out there talking. And when we decided, how do we reach this group in a really different way, knowing not everybody wants to participate in that conversation, we first had to go to those people who were talking about it. How are they talking about it? What are they talking about? What are the needs? What's the mission? And then recognize, what can we say that adds value to what they're looking for? How do we make them feel better about who they are? How do we maybe help address some of that stigma? How can our brand have a purpose in their life for adding value? And I think I keep saying this, rather than just trying to tell them about our product. We actually benefited because our brand campaign was very much rooted in that. It was patient first. Proud of that, because that changed the patient's perceptions of this product. This is not a category, actually, where patients are driving the decision. At least historically, they haven't. But that's starting to change. The more that we're talking to them about that, the more willing they are to engage. But we also had to take a step back and realize that as we were looking at what social media channels that we might want to engage with them in, everyone uses different channels differently. Facebook is where you're engaging with your family and you're sharing pictures, and it's very much your community. Twitter is often used more anonymously. I'm reading through, I'm looking for information. It's quick bites. I can engage with things, I can retweet, but I don't have to be out about who I am. I can have a totally anonymous profile out there. There's lots of different platforms that we can work on. So we said, okay, this is the first time we're venturing into this. Let's do it and let them be anonymous. Let's not out them in front of everyone in their community. So we started on Twitter, and that allowed us to build a Twitter profile and build a content strategy that was based on allowing them to understand we're there for them. So actually, our Twitter handle isn't our brand name, which is unusual. Our Twitter handle is about the disease state, so that we know we're actually talking to them. Surprisingly, we actually do get a lot of response, but the other consideration is, even if they're not responding in the traditional sense, retweeting, sharing, we're getting eyeballs. And that really, really matters. We're getting those brand impressions that we're looking for through those impressions. They're willing to accept you, but it's how you show up. And I think that's the really big difference for a lot of brands. That answered the question.
Yeah, no, that was very, very helpful. I know we're rolling here, so it's really good. And chewing through time, want to leave some time for audience questions. Before we go there, I just wanted to ask about return on investment. That seems to be something that I'm sure you get a lot, and so maybe we'll start with agencies. How do you tackle that question when a client asks you, how do I measure this in a meaningful way, and help me get through that? And then maybe we'll turn to Tracy and Laurie from Baxter. Comment.
So that's a tough question, especially in the pharma world, because we're not selling drugs on a website, so you can't tie your efforts directly to a sale. But first, I think it's important to understand what your goals and objectives are. And if it's raising awareness, and there are ways to measure that. Obviously, at the end of the day, we are trying to sell a drug, so you have to be cognizant of that too. But putting a measurement framework in place at the onset of a program is important. So, mapping out your goals and objectives, making sure everyone's aligned, and then figuring out what mediums and channels and types of content you're going to use to reach those objectives, tracking everything. So tagging every link, then you can start to say, this piece of content on Facebook drove this much engagement. This is where people went from there. This influencer posted this, and they worked better than another influencer who didn't have as much pull-through engagement. The other thing is that some of your ROI can be less tracked like that. So, if you're doing an awareness campaign and you realize that doctors value that because it's making their patients more educated and they can have better, more meaningful conversations, and it can be attributed back to a program, you might see that your doctors are writing more prescriptions. So I think there are a lot of different ways to measure ROI. Some are more tangible than others, but all are equally as important, really just depending on what your goals are.
Yeah, and I think the key there is finally starting to do that intersection of those traditional media and marketing metrics and connecting them to the sales data, which hasn't happened traditionally over the past. You haven't really done that. My clients have finally started doing that, and we're able to get down to an ROI level every channel. Some of the key things that I love is we found that some of the consumer marketing spaces are actually influencing physician prescribing behavior. And so they're able to attribute more ROI to some of that because of the spaces that we're in. So it's connecting those pieces, which obviously means your analytics team has to be involved with your marketing decisions, your marketing planning, the measurement that you're setting up from the very beginning, at bringing all people in your organization.
Oh, I can answer from a patient recruitment perspective. So it's looked at much more big picture for the ROI. So if there's projections for what a drug is expected to make annually once it's approved. So say you have a drug that's expected to make $1 billion, which is not crazy. Every month that the drug does not get approved and you don't get patients into those trials, and a part of it would be, a month of that profit. So $83 million. So one example we have is we worked on the trial for Contrave, which was one of the first FDA approved drugs. And we brought it to market 14 months faster. You can just imagine what that number meant.
Tracy, did you want to comment maybe from the Takeda side when you think about ROI and digital marketing?
So absolutely, it does take a lot of forethought, and there's really a strategy behind it in terms of working with partners, whether it's Crossix or Symphony, where you begin to kind of develop those frameworks and that you're able to tag all of your assets, and then you can get to a point where you can pretty reliably tie certain tactics to script lift. I mean, that is very exciting if you can get to that particular point. When we're unable to do that, we look at ways that we can look at engagement metrics as kind of a proxy. So for example, if you get somebody to sign up for an unbranded CRM stream or even a branded CRM stream, what's the worth of that one particular opt-in? And being able to look at it like that. Conversely, what's, I guess, the damage, if you will, if you have people opting out of your CRM database, and sort of what's the opportunity lost there? So in addition to being able to tie it into real script lift, there can also be other proxies that can be used to help determine performance.
Oh, you want me to say something too? I guess I would echo everything they said here. Definitely bring finance to the table with you. They're the ones that want to see it. I worked with finance for 5 years. ROI has always been a difficult thing for marketers to come back with. It is very difficult. But bring finance to the table so they can understand what you're dealing with to be able to get that ROI. And then bring us as your IT partners to the table so we can try to provide the best solutions to give you those analytics and figure out what you're missing so that you can deliver on.
Really helpful. Thank you for indulging me with all my questions. So maybe we'll open it up now to the audience to ask a few questions. And is there a mic? Do you have a mic? Perfect. Just raise your hand and then you'll get a mic. And Fire away.
Hi. I was wondering if any of you are targeting caregivers, and if so, what digital tactics have been effective?
Yeah, so we often target caregivers. A lot of the disease states that I work in are the patients are pretty debilitated and need someone to care for them. So I think the caregivers are still, in terms of targeting, you target by interest, or we do a lot of research to understand who the caregivers are and what their needs are, and then they're interested in the same things that a patient who can take care of themselves would be. So we just make sure that our targeting parameters are really solid and that we understand who we're going after, and then it's very similar to the way that you would target a patient.
Any other questions?
Thanks. Wondering if you guys have had any luck targeting HCPs overseas, particularly in the EU, given the strict right to privacy rules out there. Wondering how you get to them, because I've heard of even horror stories where they can ask you, where'd you get my information? And even if you say to them from public sources in the EU, that's problematic. So don't know if you guys have had anybody other than Laurie G, because I'm the lawyer in Baxter, so I don't want. You can talk to me offline. No, I'm kidding, Laurie. You're welcome to share with the group.
We do a lot of U.S. only work. I mean, we've started doing research on some of the channels that people use abroad, but I don't have a specific answer for how we've targeted them.
So I'm in the midst of a very large marketing cloud project right now, and we actually were just on the phone with privacy in the EU last Friday, and their main objective is when you're asking for consent, first, they prefer you not email anybody buying a list or anything unless you specifically, as your company, have gotten their consent. And when you get that consent, as long as you're explicitly telling them what you're asking it for, so it could be for a clinical trial, it could be for marketing promotional, it could be for supply chain information, recall information, surveys, whatever it is, as long as you're being very detailed in what you're asking for, and then you date and timestamp that acceptance, and you do a complete double opt-in process for it, they're okay with it. Anytime you want to update, if you have a preference center where you want that, so like if you're on Amazon and you go to your preferences and you choose sports and all that different stuff, or books, if you have that, again, you must have a double opt-in confirmation that that user particularly updated their information, or some sort of response that says your profile was just updated. So as long as you're being very detailed on what you're asking for, they're okay with it, being very transparent to that person that you're asking for it.
All of you mentioned social listening as a discipline, every one of you. I'm curious, how much of the data do you do yourself, or how much data do you purchase? Like, how are you gathering your data?
I actually have an analytics team within our agency, and we have seats on a couple of different social listening platforms, and they do all of the analysis. Thank goodness I don't have to do that myself. But yeah, there's platforms that you can buy seats on.
I'd also say there's also tools that you could use to do it yourself. So there's different tools that can integrate with your marketing clouds and things that can do that behavioral listening for you.
Last question from the crowd.
Could you give us a recommendation on specifically which tools you think are valuable and useful?
For social listening?
Yeah, for social listening or any kind of measurement.
We just switched over, and now I can't remember the name of it. Sysmos was one of the big ones that we have been using for quite a long time. I know there's a couple others. Sorry, not top of mind for me.
So we just actually switched from Sysmos to NetBase, and we're pretty happy with that. It even their platform even analyzes emojis, since a lot of people communicate that way. So you can get positive sentiment out of people using characters in their social posts.
There's also Trito is another one, Radiant 6, IMS Health. The interesting thing about IMS Health, and again, I have no affiliation with them, and I don't know where they are in their own pipeline now, but I mean, with the promise that one day maybe you could actually tie social media listening or social activity to script. I think that's kind of what they're trying to get to. I don't know, and I haven't seen it, but that would certainly be an interesting development.
We use Crimson Hexagon a lot, but I think point being that there are a lot of tools out there, and it just depends what exactly your need is.
In your budget.
Very good point.
Just really quick, and I think this is more an observation that I've kind of seen starting to happen. So obviously we're all aware that millennials are take over in the workforce, and in the healthcare setting, they're coming to college, going to further education. And I know I have a ton of friends that are pharmacists, residents, and so forth. And I'm starting to see more of them leverage Facebook and more of the environments we've called out as your family and your personal to promote their work. Because a lot of millennials are all, I hate to say it, I'm one of them, where we like to make posts to say, look at me, look what I've done and I've accomplished, look at children, and so forth. And so they're now starting to promote their work through that. And so I'm starting to carve that out and watch that, because I think it's interesting that maybe it's not necessarily about your product, but like you said, social listening, you're starting to see how it's being leveraged in new outcomes. So all that out.
So Carly, that's exactly true. And I've seen that a lot. I'm big and I like LinkedIn, but I see that a lot with healthcare professionals that are actually publishing on LinkedIn their papers, their clinical papers they're writing, any studies they're doing. So it's totally true. I'm not sure what platform would be their base to share, but I've seen it a lot on Facebook.
Okay, just well, last question to wrap this up. Where do you go to stay current on digital marketing strategies, tactics? How do you keep up with the evolving landscape that's going on?
So mine's easy. I'm a big LinkedIn user, so I follow a lot of digital transformation, digital marketing groups, a lot of analytics groups, because my marketers are really into the data and want to be into the data. So I try to follow that. And then some of our key healthcare professionals out there, or their providers, like in this area, like Advocate, what's Advocate doing, one of big hospitals and things. So I want to be up to speed because I work with our commercial teams a lot and how to help them. So I try to stay socially knowledge of what our providers and healthcare professionals are doing.
Yeah, all the same. We at Edelman get a lot of resources shared with us, which is really great because it's consolidated and easy to follow. On my personal social networks, I follow relevant groups to make sure that I'm getting that myself and not just someone handing it to me. And I also follow all the platform updates on what I use and figure out, like, okay, Facebook just made this change, but how does it apply to the healthcare industry? So it's kind of a crossroads between understanding the change in health and understanding changes in digital.
Yeah, I mean, all of that. And then also easy things are just signing up for some smart briefs so you get the top articles in your email every day. I just try to carve out like the first at least 15 minutes of my day before I get into anything to just kind of read some articles that are relevant. Then I don't just push them away in my inbox. I actually read a couple of them.
All of the above, plus something additional. We have a really great community within Takeda that's global, and it's a digital accelerator and innovation community that I don't even know how many, but it's hundreds of people, possibly thousands, already all around the world who are constantly providing content and publishing things that they find interesting and innovative, whether it has to do with our business or not. So in addition to all the other sources that we've mentioned here, it's just kind of another layer on top of that.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your insights. They will be here for the rest of the time, and then also I hope after for the networking session. So let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much.